When you start implementing a system, you want to be very consistent in following that system, because the more consistency you have, the more people are going to say, okay, this is the way we're doing it. I'm on board. I'm going to follow the plan.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we look at what is changing in the industry and we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is, and I'm running out of things of ways to, well, I should say,
you say the same thing
I don't say the same thing. I'm running out of sarcastic ways to introduce you. So
you might have to be nice.
Well, it might borderline and kind of getting personal, so I don't want to do that.
Right,
ladies and gentlemen, without further ado,
over here.
Mr.
Yes.
Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say good morning? We're obviously recording this in the morning, and then I will introduce our topic and our very, very special guest.
So good morning, Dan Gordon, PCO Bookkeepers, PCO M&A specialists. Yes, we have a very special guest and a very special topic, a continuation of one of the episodes that we did quite a while ago. But why don't you introduce our guest, since she is one of your teammates?
You know, I was nice to you this morning, Dan, and I'm realizing that I should not have done that. By the way, for our audience, okay, he biffed it already. So two things. Number one, this episode is sponsored by Coalmarch by Workway. He didn't say that, so I'm going to give them credit and props. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you like this episode or any of our episodes, please remember to rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, however it is that you listen to the podcast. And without further ado, today's topic is EOS implementation of field report. I'm a little nervous about this episode. I shouldn't say nervous. This is a follow-up episode, much like what Dan said. We have talked about EOS a lot on this podcast. I'm a huge believer in it. I'm a big fan of it. It has taken me a while to come around to it, but now that I'm kind of in it, I'm super. I would not call myself a fanboy. I would definitely call Sharon, who is our guest, our very special guest, a fangirl. But we're going to talk a little bit about how you implement this and really the journey that Triangle has been taking as part of our implementation of EOS, because I can tell you it's been one big bowl of peaches. It's been super easy. And so I want to introduce our guest. She's going to talk a lot about this at our company. So if you don't know, which I'm sure everyone does, Sharon is an absolute rock star. It's Sharon Roebuck-McBride, who was recently married. Congratulations, Sharon. She has spent 9 years in the pest control industry, and most of her career has been in Washington State. She has come to Triangle Home Services here in Raleigh, which is a huge change for her, but we very much enjoy having her here. Her passion, and I would absolutely agree with this, is people and growing them. And as a result of growing companies, she says relationships are the cornerstone of any service industry, from which I agree. Sharon is also a strong advocate in women in pest control. She started the PWIPM chapter in Washington State. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And she has helped tremendously with growth and advocating for women in our industry. She is also a huge advocate of the EOS operating system. And with that, let's talk about a little bit about her. She's a mother of 3 adult children, and she has 4 grandchildren, which we don't hear about at all at Triangle. In case you're listening, we never hear about her grandkids. I'm joking. We hear about them every week, which we love. And she loves to be anywhere near water, which is true. So having said all of that, Ms. Sharon, good morning, and thank you for the podcast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, Sharon, why don't you talk a little bit about your background here? I didn't do the best job in setting you up here, but let's talk a little bit about your background and then kind of your path to Triangle and then what you do at Triangle.
Sure. So my background is service industry. As far as my career goes, I owned my own chimney sweep business in Denver, Colorado for about 15 years. I then relocated to Seattle, Washington, where I got into the pest control industry. I would say I kind of fell into it by accident. But once I was in it, I loved it. And I stayed with the same company in Washington for a little over 8 years, almost 9 years before coming to Triangle. That is where I started my EOS journey, and loved it ever since. I had the opportunity to connect with Donnie, and he invited me to take the big plunge to move to the Raleigh area and work for him at Triangle. And I decided to do that. So I've been at Triangle for almost a year now. In May, it will be a year. One of my main purposes at Triangle is to implement EOS, and I'm the Vice President of Culture and Customer Experience.
And I will say that Sharon has brought a ton of fun to Triangle. We were not fun before.
Well, it all starts at the top.
Yeah,
but,
it certainly does, and I'm not fun, but I will say that I've had more fun with Sharon on board. It has been great. We did a kickoff party in January in which we all, I legitimately, I sung karaoke. I probably would never do it again in my life, but I did do that. It was one heck of a party. And so anyway, so welcome. Thank you for coming on board. So we want to talk a little bit about on this episode, our journey with EOS, because we had tried and failed to implement EOS before. I know I've mentioned this on episodes past, but I was not a huge fan of EOS when it first came out, just because I felt like E-Myth is systems, procedures, checklist. E-Myth's got all this covered. And it wasn't until I broke through my own issues of trying to figure out if this was just a fad or not. And I actually read the book, and the chapter that most stuck out to me was the culture chapter and ways to build a culture, because everyone talks about it. No one talks about how to do it. And so I became a fan after that. We tried to implement, we failed. And then Sharon came on board, and Sharon is like,
why did you fail? Did you not have an implementer? You just tried?
We did not. So we didn't
yourself, because I hear that all the time.
Yeah, 100%. So we said, hey, we can do this ourselves. We don't need an implementer, which was completely stupid, by the way. We should not have went down that road, but we did. And, we just, when you don't have experience in it, you don't have someone there's a lot of nuances to it that it's hard to see from an outside perspective. And so, Sharon, why don't you go through just briefly kind of the basics of EOS, just to kind of rehack everyone's brain. And then let's roll into kind of what you ran into when you got into Triangle, and we can kind of start walking through how we did it. So why don't we do that?
Sure. So everyone knows by now that EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating Systems, which is, say that fast 5 times. So we just call it EOS like the rest of the world, but that's really what it stands for. It is an operating system that's ideal for entrepreneurial companies between 2 million, 50 million, and anywhere from 2 employees to 250, 300 employees. That's really its sweet spot. EOS runs on 6 key components, which are vision. So you want to have a specific vision that defines the company's purpose. At Triangle, it's ABGB, which means always be getting better. And you want to make sure that vision is shared by your whole company. The second component is data. You want to make sure that you are measuring the right things, that you have a scorecard available for your company overall, which is 3 to 7 numbers that if you were on a desert island somewhere as an owner or a CEO, you could look up those 3 to 7 numbers on that scorecard and know whether your company is doing great, on track, or in trouble. So that scorecard is an important part of the data piece, and having measurables for all of your processes. The next key component that you should run your company by is processes. They should be documented and followed by all. Traction is the next component. And obviously Traction is a book. It's like your guidebook, your running manual, but it also teaches you to live in the 90-day world and have rocks or goals for every 90 days and a weekly level 10 meeting. The next one is issues, and everybody's got them, right? So there's no point in denying that they exist. So you want to make an issues list and then identify, discuss, and solve those issues. That's known as IDS, identify, discuss, solve. And then last but not least, and the most important piece of the pie, in my opinion, is people. None of us can run our companies without people. Having the right person in the right seat and letting everyone walk in their unique abilities is the most important thing that puts it all together. It's the special sauce that makes it work. So that's a pretty high level overview of EOS and the 6 key components to run your company by.
So Sharon, I have a question for you. I'm a listener, and somehow, some way I continue to listen to this podcast. I don't know why I do that, but it's almost like a bad habit. I'm joking. I am listening to this podcast and I'm interested in EOS. I've read about it. How do I get started? Like, if I'm an owner and it's like, okay, yeah, I think I should do this. What would be the best thing for someone who is interested? I mean, we're going to talk about the benefits of doing it. And I will tell you, in the short time that we've been doing EOS, it has absolutely transformed Triangle. It really has. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, we would not be doing this episode. We would not be talking about this. We would, if I didn't wholeheartedly believe in the process and what it's done for our business. But I want to back it up for a moment for folks who, they're like, okay, yep, this all sounds good. How do they go about just getting started? Like what should be like the number one thing that they should do?
So the number one thing is you want to identify your visionary in the company. Who is the visionary? 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the owner, the CEO, the president. Normally, that is the visionary or the leader of the company. That's not always true, but most of the time it is. So you want to start there. You want to get your leadership team on board, which means, Dan said it earlier, I think he was joking, but it's completely true, that everything starts at the top, right? So that top tier of leadership has to be invested and bought in, or it's not going to work. And then you can start rolling out to the rest of the organization. So there's a couple different ways you can go about it. And both ways can work. One way is definitely a little bit harder than the other. But definitely cheaper. You want to either make sure that you have someone at your company that is completely focused on and well-versed in EOS, that's willing to own that project and push it throughout the whole company. If you can't do that, you can hire an implementer from EOS worldwide.com, and they'll come in and implement EOS for you. So there's not a right or wrong way. I have done it both ways. I've seen it done both ways. And if you can afford an implementer and you're in a place to do that, that's a great way to go about it. But if you're going to self-implement, I would definitely suggest that you have at least one person who that is their main core focus, along with other duties. They can still do their regular job, but you might want to take a little bit off of their plate and give them some time to really focus on getting EOS implemented throughout the company, which means they're going to have to know it first, forwards, backwards. So maybe invest some time in that person to train them, send them to an EOS conference, make sure that they're well-versed in EOS before they dive in to help the rest of the organization.
That, by the way, what you just said is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, so these conferences, are they for implementers or people who work for companies who are trying to implement?
So they are specifically for companies running on EOS. Most of the speakers at the conferences are implementers, professional EOS implementers, or other people in EOS, the CEO, whoever they decide to bring in. But all of the speakers are experts in EOS and in running EOS.
So let's just take a moment, and we didn't talk about this at the beginning. I'm kind of realizing we probably should. Let's talk about the value of EOS, the value that EOS will bring to a business. A lot of times I feel like as owners and as even leaders, we're so focused on growing the business. We're so focused on trying to get to a certain level. Sometimes it's easy to forget that you have to pay just as much attention to how you run your business. Not only, in addition to how you're getting results. And I think, when you're smaller, do you need EOS? Probably not. It's when you add a lot of people and you try to scale is when things start getting complicated, and simple things like just basic communication gets very, very difficult. And so I know for me, when I think about, it's almost like we have to be very intentional about how we work as we're doing the work. Any thoughts on that, Sharon? Do you agree with that? Do you feel like that's really the value of EOS?
I do. I feel that it brings so much to the table in the form of organization, following a blueprint, having a structure within the company. I know that lots of small companies that are growing and growing rapidly start to operate in a chaotic environment because you're just growing so rapidly, you're so busy, you're accomplishing so much. You spend most of your time putting out fires, sometimes the same fires over and over again.
By the way, for our listeners, things don't go like this at Triangle at all. We're completely wrapped up. It's just smooth as butter. There's no chaos.
Nothing. We run perfectly like
yes,
a watch.
like a Swiss watch. That's right.
So EOS just brings a lot of clarity and focus. It actually really helps people feel certain of their, like it gives them a certain security in the fact that they know that if they do have an issue, they can bring it forward. There's a level of transparency that's involved with the VTO and being able to see our numbers as a company, our 3-year plan, our 10-year plan, all of our goals, our quarterly rocks. Everyone knows what the company's rocks are. The path to where we're going is crystal clear. And having that accountability chart in place where people know who they need to go to for any sort of issue, and a path to get to the end of the road, right? If they're struggling. The level 10 meetings bring an opportunity for everyone to have a voice and for issues to just truly get solved and not just pushed back and forth around the table. And then it's talked about again the next week and the next week. And then
I have to pause there real quick because I remember, and just for our listeners, if you haven't figured this out yet, Sharon is the person that's implementing at Triangle. She's the one that owns EOS. We all own it, but she is our visionary leader to drive the process for EOS. So obviously, I don't know if I'd call myself a visionary, but I'm definitely more dialed into what the company's doing. And this is a key part, but Sharon is the one that's driving it. And I wanted to bring it back to, I want to talk a little bit about what you saw when you first came. You know, ultimately, when I'm thinking about our listeners, it's like, okay, well, I'm a fan of EOS, but bringing it back to L10 meetings, I remember you saying when we first started, you're like, Donnie, you're going to love L10 meetings. You're going to be excited about them. And I remember laughing internally. I'm like, I don't know that I've ever been excited about any meeting, but it's actually happened now. So
tell us what is an L10 meeting?
Why don't I let Sharon do that?
Okay. So an L10 meeting is a level 10 meeting. It starts at a 10. So you rate the meeting at the end. There's some qualifications, and that is that it starts on time and it ends on time. It's at the same place and the same day every week, so you know exactly what to expect. There's a very specific agenda that you follow so that it keeps you on track. And this gives people a time to really, one, connect with their team. We love to have them in person. If you can do that, I highly recommend that. When you're going through the agenda, it gives you a time for personal best, professional best. You go over your scorecard for the week, and that helps you know if you're on track or not in your department, or if it's a leadership meeting in the company. We go over our goals for the quarter to make sure that we're on track. And then we spend the main part of the meeting is discussing our issues, right? We prioritize them. We take the time to go through each one. If we don't get to all of them in 1 week, that's okay. We leave them on the agenda for the next week, but we don't move on until we've solved that issue or have a plan to solve that issue. So knowing that these meetings are at a specific time, a specific day, and that they're gonna start on time and end on time is just, it really gives you the freedom to know that, hey, I'm excited to go to this meeting. I know we're gonna get some things accomplished. I know that my voice is gonna be heard. I get to hear what everyone else's issues and opinions and ideas are. And then we can move on with our week. So there's never that dread of
how much time. So what is the optimal time for a meeting?
90 minutes long. 90 minutes.
Hello? 90 minutes?
Yep,
Yeah.
90 minutes.
Every week.
Every week.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'll say too is each month I go around and I visit with all of our managers. And by far, this is the most positive feedback I get. I ask, how's traction going? How's you? And without fail, every manager says, we love the level 10 meetings. And to what Sharon
Donnie,
was
are
just
you
saying,
always at them? Or
no, I'm only at the leadership one. I don't go to, there's a
Okay.
manager's L10, there's a leadership L10, there's a team L10. I only go to the leadership L10, which I think would be disruptive if I went to all of them. But long story short, the thing that everyone says, and I'm not joking when I say this, that everyone has said is that we get stuff done now. And mainly because the focus is on issues, right? We look at our numbers, we look at what's going on, we connect, and then we get down to the business of doing business, like, okay, because we always have problems. And so I want to bring it back around and I want to get into implementing EOS at Triangle. And so Sharon, can you just walk us through kind of some big wins that you've seen so far as part of our journey? And then also some big challenges, because, when I was before, in case you didn't figure it out, I was not joking at all when I said we don't have chaos and we're growing like crazy and we just got a big crap show going on from time to time. We're in the midst of doing EOS, but we also have a lot happening at the business right now. And so it's kind of, I was not being sarcastic whatsoever, but can you just talk through some big wins so far with EOS at Triangle and then also some big challenges that we've had?
Sure. So I feel that obviously we've just talked about it, but the biggest win has been the L10 meetings. To be a little more specific on that, Dan, you asked if Donnie goes to them. So Donnie just goes to the leadership one that we have once a week. And then all of our managers have one once a week. And then those managers meet with their teams once a week. So this is cascaded all the way through the organization from the top, from Donnie, who's our visionary, all the way down to our field workers, right? So
how many L10 different L10 meetings do you have?
So the rule is you can only go to 2. So I go to the leadership one and the management one, and then those managers have one with their teams. And we have a lot. We have one for every department. So boy, that's a good question. So we have the executive one, the managers one, the field technicians have one, the office has one, our marketing department has one, our HR department has one, our door-to-door department has one. I would say we have about between 8 and 10 L10s a week running throughout the company.
And you're only going to 2.
Well, yes. So right now I am going to more than 2 because
by the way, for those not watching on YouTube, Sharon gave me a big wink. Yeah, 2.
Yeah.
So part of my job of implementing traction does not allow me to only go to 2 at this time. Right. Because we're in the heat of training and making sure that everyone stays on track. So the EOS, the level 10 meetings have been a big win for us. I want to make another point of, we didn't really talk about where this fits in, but every quarter you should do what's called a state of the company address, and that is to the entire company. So whether you take one day and meet in one place, or you have to do 2 or 3 different ones that are the same, this has been, in my opinion, one of the things that's really helped us move forward with not just EOS, but our culture, our stability, our growth, everything. Donnie meets with everyone quarterly. We go over the VTO, which is the Vision Traction Organizer, which has all of our 8 questions on it, our 3-year target, our 10-year goal, our 3 uniques, our core values. It's got everything that we are running on as a company. It also has our goals on there. So every quarter, we wrap up the quarter with a state of the company address. Donnie goes over what our goals were, if we met them, what our issues were, what our rocks were, which are just goals for that quarter. And so the whole point of the state of company address is where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So those are the 3 things that are covered. And this is what really helps push EOS through the whole company, because there's that transparency there, where if I'm a field technician, I can look at the VTO and I'm completely clear on where we are financially. I know if we met our goals or we didn't meet our goals. I know what the plan is moving forward, and I can see what the company issues are. So it's a great way to build that trust through the company with such complete transparency about where the company is. It also gives our people time to see Donnie, to ask questions if they want to, which they do, and just build that relationship between our visionary and the rest of the company. That's been a big
when you have these meetings, so let's say the technicians have their own and the marketing department has their own, how do their issues and or goals get moved up to the next level?
That's a great question.
Is that what they call it, a level 10?
Yep. Yeah, that's how they get moved up. So when they bring issues forward at a department meeting, that manager then brings those issues to the manager's level 10, especially if they're cross-departmental, which we all know that in this industry, we all affect each other so much. The office does one thing wrong on the schedule and it trickles down all the way down to the customer, right? So absolutely, those issues get brought by that department manager up to our department level, our managers level 10, where we discuss them as a team. Sometimes those issues are solved right there. We come up with a great idea because everyone knows that 10 heads are better than one, and everyone gets a chance to be heard. And collaboration is one of our favorite things at Triangle. We love to collaborate and everyone throws their ideas out and then we come up with a great plan. Sometimes though, those issues have to be taken up one more level where we have to say, hey, this is a bigger decision. It's a policy change or it's a process change and it needs to be taken to our leadership team. And then we'll take those to our leadership meeting with Donnie and our senior vice president, our operations manager, and myself, and we'll discuss those things there and decide, hey, do we want to change this process or do we want to eliminate this line of business? Do we want to add this one? So those are where the bigger decisions are made, is that are really going to affect the company long term. But it kind of goes just up that accountability chart, which is nothing more than an organizational chart. And everyone knows where to take their issues. And it all starts at the L10 where they can be heard and have a voice. So that is a great question, Dan. And that's exactly how that rolls up.
Let me add that this is one of the biggest reasons that people like these meetings, is because, pardon my language, but shit just gets done. Like, they're like, when something comes out of a meeting, like let's just say something comes out of a tech L10, there's going to get a decision made that week and it's going to come back the following week. And there's going to be clarity as to this is how we're moving forward. Now, some decisions may take longer than a week, but point is that whatever that problem issue that the technician brings up, it's going to get heard all the way through that week. And it may get dealt with, it may not be, but it's not going away until we figure out this is how it may come back and be like, well, suck it up, buttercup. There's nothing we can do, right? That might be the answer. Or it may be like, no, you're right. We need to change this. And so I think when I bring it back to the L10s and why they're so popular, at least at Triangle, is that people feel like they're heard and things get done, they get resolved. And so this is, to me, probably one of the greatest parts of our L10 meeting, is the focus on issues and the focus on getting things, resolved, accomplished, and dealt with. And so we can move forward, because that's when you start tacking on problems and people start realizing like, hey, I give my input, no one responds to it, nothing happens anyway. What does that do to the culture? Like, it just starts a really negative cycle. And so people are like, yeah, I'm listened to, and I may not always like the answer, but things are happening and people are in and they care. And it's a big deal. So now let's talk about some dirt here, Sharon. We're getting close on time, and I don't want people to think that we just have got everything figured out and we're just doing so great at Triangle. Because, by the way, we've had a lot of success, but we've also had a lot of challenges. And I will tell you, I know this is going to shock Sharon when I say this, my biggest challenge is just speed. I would love to go faster.
That is so shocking.
I know it's shocking to hear that from me, but yes.
So obviously there's growing pains whenever you're implementing something new, and just keeping everyone on track can feel like a challenge. So one of our biggest challenges, in my opinion, is that when you start implementing a system, you want to be very consistent in following that system, because the more consistency you have, the more people are going to say, okay, this is the way we're doing it. I'm on board. I'm going to follow the plan. There's still that temptation to go outside of the plan, right? So to go around their managers. And it's never malicious or on purpose, but sometimes the culture of speed that we have at Triangle is something that I've really never seen before, because I am a speed person. I want everything done yesterday. So I have to have a lot of self-discipline to not put that on other people, because I am very much like, get this done, get it done now. So we have kind of a culture of that at Triangle, which is a great thing for getting shit done, right? But sometimes it's a problem, because sometimes if we don't get the answer that we want immediately, we'll just keep asking other people until we get our point across, get what we want, try to move quicker. So following the accountability chart can be a challenge. People will skip their managers sometimes and walk into my office and say, what about this, this, and this? And I'll say, why don't you put that on the IDS for next week for L10? And have you talked to your manager? I think I'm going to get T-shirts for us that say, have you talked to your manager? Because we seem to kind of still want to go outside of that accountability chart. And that just causes chaos and confusion, mostly because then your manager doesn't know what's going on with you, with issues that you're having. We have some managers that will ask another person's employee to do something or for information without looping that manager in. And that's where the communication starts to get muddy and slide back to where it was pre-EOS. I would say out of everything, that is probably our biggest challenge, is to just follow that structure that's been set out for us.
And by the way, Sharon is being very nice, because I am a huge offender of this. I've tried my best to get better, but I am definitely one that I'm running at a certain speed. And I don't even want to take the time to include. I'm like, if that person handles that, I'm going to call them. Let's figure it out and let's go. And this one has been a difficult one for me, but I have been trying. We'll say that. What other challenges?
Some of the other challenges are more, once you have everything implemented at the top and with your management staff, sometimes you can start feeling like, hey, we got this. But you have to remember that it takes a long time to trickle throughout the whole organization, right? So it's getting those frontline people on board, bought in, practicing it every day. So that can be a challenge. It is presenting as a challenge for us. And I think it would in any sort of service industry where there's technicians in the field. The people who are in the office that are together every day, that are practicing this discipline every day, get it a lot sooner. But you have to think about it. If you're in the field all week and you're just in the office or sometimes on a Zoom once a week for a meeting, you're not getting that complete saturation of what this system can do. So I think it is always a challenge to get it implemented throughout the whole company. It just takes time and consistency. I can't drive home any stronger that the more consistent you are with following the process in the beginning, feeling those growing pains, being patient, the bigger win you're going to have on the outside. So I would say the second biggest challenge we have is just getting this throughout the whole company. We are starting some additional trainings for our field workers. We've had them all get the book, What the Heck is EOS? You should give that to every new person walking through your door so you can, kind of tuck them under the umbrella and help them grow in the system as they're new with the company so they understand what it is. But that has been a challenge for us as well.
So is there a maximum number of issues that you want on your list? And what happens to the issues that you want on the list, but are, there's just too many? What do you do with them?
So before you start your IDS session every week at your L10, you want to prioritize the issues, right? So you as a team decide, hey, we're going to prioritize these. We're going to actually number them in case we run out of time. Those issues that you don't get to stay on the IDS for the next week. Then you reprioritize the issues the next week. So when you're solving issues, they either go to a to-do list, which has to be done in 7 days. They get put on a quarterly issues list, which means, hey, we know this is an issue. It's not a It's not an imperative issue that we deal with this quarter because we already have our rocks set for this quarter. So we're going to put this on our VTO under issues to deal with next quarter. So they either get solved and made a rock or a to-do, or they get pushed forward, but they don't get removed. The only way that they would get removed is if everyone agrees, okay, this is solved. We have a process in place for this now. Let's move on.
And that list by far it's not static whatsoever. I mean, it's probably maybe 1 to 3 things that are consistently on our issues list. We try to take action, and much like what Sharon said, it either results in a to-do, it gets bagged, or it's like, well, something gets done and then we move on. And so the one thing I will highlight for our listeners here is the genius of this system. If you think about this just for a moment, if you're an owner and you're anything like me, you're constantly solving problems and you're trying to get somewhere. What that turns into is 8 million priorities. And what also it turns into is people not being super clear on, this is what I need to get done right now. The beauty of EOS is the discipline it brings to you as an owner and the discipline it brings to the organization to really think through your 90 days and to understand that things are going to pop up, but nothing happens until, and not to say that you can't change a rock, you can, but it's rare, right? It's like, it's something that that you do intentionally. And so what it does is it allows people, number one, it allows you as an owner or a visionary to know, okay, we're going to get to the things that I want to do, but it also gives your team time to get things done. You're not constantly, left to my own devices, we would start 8 million projects and we would get about 7 million of them halfway done. And so it's almost like, you spend all this time dealing in chaos. And so I like it because I know, okay, the big picture things are going to happen. And then I believe our team likes it because it's absolute clarity of like, this is what's the priority right now. And this is what needs to happen right now. And that 90-day cycle allows you to continually to, number one, give inputs into the business, but keep it at a pace where things actually get accomplished. Like
do you keep a list of things that have been solved? Like we do this, and we're probably nowhere near as good as you, but we use Basecamp, right? And we just, once it's done, we cross it off, but we have a history of what we've done so that we can see if we're making progress. Do you do that?
I can tell you right now, my brain is always 5 years ahead.
Mm-hmm. So once it falls off, it's gone. It's gone. And how do you monitor whether you've really done a good job with solving the issue?
So identify, discuss, and solve. If it's solved, it doesn't come up again. If it starts to come up over and over again, I make people stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Is this solved? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes we think it's solved and we go down the road of the new process that we've created. And then we say, hey, this isn't solved. Turns out there's some other pieces of this. But we do have our agenda, Stan. So every week we have an LTEL agenda. So the agenda has all of our notes from the meeting. It has all the issues. It has our to-dos. We even write down our personal and professional best on those. So if I have gone through past agendas several times, especially for the managers meetings, because something will come up again and I'll say, nope, that we already decided that. And someone will say, no, we didn't. And all I have to do is pull up that agenda that says, we decided so-and-so is going to own this, and put it on the to-do list. So we do have a track record, if you will, of what we've discussed. Very rarely do we have to go back to them, but it is handy to have those agendas, and we just keep them in a folder in Google Drive per month, per year, per week, and then people can access those. Also, we list the to-dos on there, so the managers are constantly going back to see what's on their to-do list, because that to-do list has to be completed in 7 days. So when we come back for the next meeting, we go over our to-do list and we say, is it done or not done? And if it's not done, we IDS why it's not done and either reassign it out or so on and so on. So yes, we do have somewhat of a history.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. Sharon, I just want to say thank you for coming on board. This has been a fun episode to do. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. Like there's so much going on. There's so much that we've done, so many wins that we've had and so many losses that we've taken. I feel like, we give our listeners just a little glimpse behind the curtain. We'll probably have you on just for our listeners. I have a major rock for the year, a big goal that I want to be 80% on EOS. And when you get into EOS, they'll say 80% is kind of the benchmark, right? That's when you're really doing well. And the idea that someone would be 100% is almost, I don't want to say it's impossible. I would just say,
well, the idea that you've got somebody who's on the team all the time, as opposed to every quarter swooping in, telling you what you're doing wrong and whatnot, or what you're doing right, and then swooping out. I love the idea.
I think you have to, true. If I had to do this again, which, by the way, with Sharon, we don't need an implementer. Sharon is our implementer at Triangle.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have someone like that on my team, absolutely, I would use an implementer now that I've seen it, because there's a lot of things that you can read and totally screw it up in your interpretation of it. It's just, there's only so much you can gain out of a book. And so Sharon's recommendation at the very beginning was spot on, which is, if you want to go down this road and you don't have someone on your team that's an implementer or is very well versed in this, I would get to a conference, really understand how this works, and then get someone on your team and then maybe bring in an implementer that swoops in, because again, having someone that's kind of outside the fray, that has a different perspective, they can see things that you're not going to see. They're going to see dynamics happening on the team that you're not going to see. And so it's actually, I think it's valuable having kind of that outside perspective. I don't know that they would be solving everything, but at least to have that perspective, I think would be really, really good. And then the other part of it is that, let's just be real here. It's the work of it. Implementing EOS is not easy, but it absolutely helps tame the chaos. And it absolutely, for me, it's been a game changer at our business, and I'm super excited about where it's going. And I'm really excited about us getting to 80% by the end of the year. So having said all of that,
how do you measure that? How do you measure 80%?
Oh, that's a great question. We're going to answer this one. We're going to answer this one, and then we got to close. But Sharon, would you like to take that one, or you want me to?
So there's an organizational checkup that you can do. It's super easy. You send it out to your employees. It asks 8 questions, where you are on a scale of 1 to 10 in those 8 questions, and then it gives you a score. So you want to just make sure that you're doing that every quarter. Plus, you'll see things drop off the issue list. You'll see your culture change. You'll see everything tighten up. You'll definitely know. So,
yeah, for me, I have gone through and looked at, here are the tangible tools. How many of these tools are we using? And ultimately, it goes back to what Sharon said. You look at what these surveys are saying, and you look at how you're behaving as a business. And if you're behaving and you're actually following the system, and your organizational checkup is moving up, you're in the slot. In my mind, you're making progress. So, all righty. Well, Sharon, we're going to bring you in for another update, probably towards the end of the year, just to check in to see how we're doing. And Dan, anything to add before we finish out?
No, I think this has been really productive, really helpful. I know I'm going to have a couple of people from my firm who we've been implementing, but not to the degree that you have, and probably not the 80%, but we're definitely going to study this episode, because I think it's very helpful.
No, it's been, and I will say that Sharon has just been fantastic. So thank you, Sharon, for not only being at Triangle, but helping us get through this process, because it has absolutely changed our business. And I'm excited about where it's going. So we didn't talk about our values. We didn't talk about the big goals. We didn't talk about all the things what this is actually going to turn into, but we absolutely can talk about that in a later episode. And with that, we're going to sign off. Just a reminder, all the resources and topics we talked about today are available on our podcast website, pmpindustryinsider.com. Just take a look under show notes for this show. And with that, Sharon, thank you very much. Dan, I will see you later.
Thanks, Sharon.
You guys take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.